Welcome back to The Big Picture. It is 9:30 on your Thursday, and we are talking primary election season. Doug Petcash joining us now. We are also joined by Associate Professor of Political Science at Bowling Green State University, Dr. Nicole Califf-Hughes. Dr. Hughes, thanks so much for joining us on this Thursday, and Doug, thank you as well.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Califf-Hughes, talk to us a little bit about, what are some of the big drivers of this primary? We see a lot of candidates talking about a lot of different things, especially cost, as it always is in the elections, but we're also talking about some more niche things. We're talking about data centers as well.
So yeah, there's a couple things I think that are really going to drive Ohio voters to the polls. And some of these are going to just be echoed nationwide as well. So I think you're looking at affordability, cost, what people are seeing when they go to the grocery store, but also what people are seeing at the gas pumps. Those are going to drive people to the polls right now. How much difference that is going to make in the kind of immediate future remains to be seen. This is a primary election. I think this is going to play a much bigger role in November, but you are going to see a little bit of that, I think, driving people. Then you're also going to see more local things like data centers. And I think even if that's not on the ballot right now, there is a large effort to get a ballot initiative on the November ballot that would actually ban data centers producing a certain amount of energy. And so that's in the signature gathering phase right now. But I think you're going to see a lot of issues like that kind of pushing people to the polls and just increasing the general political awareness of Ohio voters.
When we look at the primary, there aren't a whole lot of contested races, but there really is a lot of focus on the U.S. Senate race right now, Dr. Califf-Hughes, and we're starting to see more in line of with spending, where we saw Senator John Husted receive he didn't receive it, but the Senate Leadership Fund PAC is going to be putting $79 million to support him. Are you expecting that race to be anywhere near as expensive as the Marino v. Sherrod Brown race in 2024?
Probably. The Marino-Sherrod Brown race in 2024 was, I think, the most expensive U.S. Senate race in history. Mm-hmm. And my guess is we're going to be back there again in the fall, partly because the Senate appears to be in play for both parties in a way that we may not have expected 2 years ago. And so races that are competitive, which Ohio's race is going to be competitive, I think is really going to see a lot of influx of campaign funds from within Ohio, but from nationwide groups and people from outside Ohio as well. And so I think we're going to see spending start to ramp up and then really come into play over the summer and into November, because it's going to be a very competitive race.
And for someone who only votes in general elections, what are they missing by skipping the primary?
So some of it's just going to depend on where they live. So I love voting. I think voting is great. Everyone should vote. But the primary is going to give you, for these large races, so this U.S. Senate race, Secretary of State, Governor, it's going to give you the ability to choose the candidates for the general election. And that's important because you want to have candidates that you're excited about. And so if you can get those people onto the general ballot, you'll have even more of a say in what Ohio politics looks like. But then at the more local level, the May election, right, that's coming up in less than a week depending on where you live, is going to have school levies on it. There's going to be other local levies or local issues on the ballot. And by not voting, you miss the opportunity to weigh in entirely on those. So while a lot of the focus, especially at the state level, is these large primaries for these big statewide offices and for U.S. Senate that we're going to vote on in the fall, at the most local level, it's a lot of the stuff that affects the average Ohioan on a day-to-day basis far more than the primary. So these are actually like the primary for governor. So these are going to actually be really important local issues that people are missing out on. And so I think everyone should go and vote, because it's these things that you really get a chance to weigh in on.
And switching gears kind of over to that gubernatorial race, obviously for the Democrats, it's just Amy Acton on the ticket. But for the Republicans, you've got Vivek Ramaswamy, who has basically the blessing of the presidential administration. Then you've got Casey Poosh from Toledo, and then a maybe from Heather Hill, depending on what comes out of the Supreme Court ruling. If she's allowed back on the ballot for Tuesday, will that change anything at all, do you think?
My guess is no. My guess is that we're so far down the pipeline now that whether Hill is on the ballot is really not going to make much of a difference in the outcome. The people that have gotten the most attention, right, Amy Acton and Vivek Ramaswamy, those are likely going to emerge as the front runners. But it is possible, right? There are, if people who vote in a libertarian primary, there are libertarian candidates. Casey Push, I mean, he could siphon voters away, right, from Ramaswamy if people are passionate about his campaign. Ramaswamy does have the presidential endorsement, which is unique because it came so early, right? It came way before the primary election and way before those endorsements typically would come. Usually they will wait till after the primary before giving an endorsement. So that it came pretty darn early there. But I think what makes not necessarily the primaries, but the election so interesting here is that the major candidates, right, Amy Acton and Vivek Ramaswamy, are not traditional candidates. Women are not historically the top of the gubernatorial ticket all that often. They're becoming more so, but it's just not as common if you look at US history. And we have a minority male candidate, and that's also rare. And so the two frontrunners, not to discount Casey Push's campaign, are non-traditional candidates from a race, ethnicity, and gender perspective, and even from a religious perspective. And I think that makes the contest really interesting.
And more in your area of the state, in Northwest Ohio, we're watching here as we get closer to our election coverage, the District 9 race, which is Marcy Kaptur's seat. She's held that for 44 years, I believe now, since 42 years, since 1984. It's a Republican-leaning district, and she's got it's going to be a competitive race likely for her. It was tight the last time. What are you watching in particular with that race? I believe there are 5 Republicans in the primary for District 9 as well.
So this is a really interesting one. So, right, she is the longest serving woman in the House of Representatives. She's been in office for a really long time. And historically, she has garnered bipartisan support. This has been a Republican-leaning district since we redrew the lines 4 years ago. As things have shifted around, it has become significantly more Republican-leaning. But she was still reelected in 2022 and in 2024, though by an increasingly smaller margin. And I think what we're going to see here is it's really going to be a function of who emerges from the Republican primary. You have a lot of candidates in the primary, 2 or 3 of which, probably 2, who are really competitive in the primary. So I think that depending on which candidate emerges from that will shape Kaptur's campaign, but is also going to shape fundraising. And I think that's another race where you are going to see it become a tremendously expensive race as we get closer to November.
We're hearing a lot from area communities here in Central Ohio about levy fatigue. Why do you feel like these communities are experiencing that?
So levy fatigue is going to be primarily for school levies is going to be a function of Ohio's school funding model. Ohio has historically struggled with funding public education. If you think back, right, it's been declared unconstitutional multiple times. There have been different efforts to fix it, but nothing that has actually solved the problem. And what that does is it turns the responsibilities over onto the local communities to fund their schools through levies. Levies are not popular broadly with the public because it costs money. And even if we recognize the benefits of a quality public education system and right, the public good of that, most of us aren't super pumped to pay higher taxes. However, we have to have schools. And there's no real other option for funding schools right now other than school levies. And so this is kind of change that has to come from the state. And it has been a real struggle. And there have been different efforts to make these changes. But as long as schools need to, pay for things like buildings, keeping the lights on, teachers, custodial staff, and then the extracurriculars that are really popular with the community, sports, music, all of that kind of stuff, it's going to fall on levies. And it's going to take increasing levies to keep the schools open. And because when a levy doesn't pass, it doesn't mean the need for the money goes away. So it's back on the ballot the next time. And it creates kind of a cycle of levy after levy after levy that voters don't like. But voting no or opting not to vote doesn't solve the problem that started it, which is schools need to keep the lights on.
And we're going to be talking about one of those in here in Central Ohio coming up in just a minute. It's the Pickerington income tax levy that's going to be on the ballot May 5th. And get into those details. But Dr. Caleb Hughes, I want to say ahead of time, thank you also, because you're going to be part of our massive election night coverage here, where we're going to be broadcasting to the Columbus market, the Cleveland market, the Toledo market, all from our location here in Columbus. And you were with me in the last election, and appreciate you coming in for Tuesday as well. We'll be talking to you just like we have been right here. We always appreciate your expertise.
I'm happy to come in. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Caleb Hughes, thank you once again. All right, Doug, let's talk about some of these races back here at home, because we've talked about the gubernatorial race, the Senate race, so these widespread ones, but there's a lot that you're going to see on your ballot that's so localized and isolated.
And they matter.
They do matter, and you heard Dr. Caleb Hughes say it. I've talked with Franklin County Board of Elections Executive Director Antone White. He says primary elections are really important, especially because of these local issues. Voters in Columbus have one that's coming up. It's for it's the Columbus Community Crisis Response Amendment. It's issue 5 on the ballot for Columbus voters, and this is one that is about responding to mental health, behavioral health crises in the city. Who responds to them? Is it going to be trained clinicians, peer support groups, or peer support members, trained social workers who can go to handle these calls? And this would all be coordinated through 911. So these would be dispatched through 911. And these trained people would then be the ones who are sent out to deal with these mental or behavioral health crises, such as could be a substance use issue that's going on. It could be someone having a breakdown of some sort. It could be a homeless person with an issue. And I talked with Council President, Columbus City Council President Shannon Hardin the other day, and he put it this way. He's like, when people are dealing with a break-in at their home, they want the police to be there. If they have a fire at their house, they want the fire department to be there. But if grandma, who has dementia, is having a serious issue with a relative over their illness or medication, you want a trained professional clinician or social worker to be there to respond. So this is going to be on the ballot. For early voters, it's on the ballot already, of course, but on May 5th, this is what's being decided. And what this is doing is this would codify this into Columbus City Code. So basically, it would make it city law that this service would have to be provided. And that's what people are deciding right now. The Columbus Safety Collective was really behind this effort. And they say that they, on their petitions to basically, ask the city to put this on the ballot, about 30,000 people signed it. So now the people of Columbus are going to get the choice on this.
All right.
Okay, Doug, let's talk about the Pickerington income tax levy as well. This is another hot
Can I
topic.
add one thing real quick on the Columbus, on the Columbus Crisis Response Amendment, is that people are not voting for a tax levy or an increase in this case. This is simply about making this city law. That Council President Hardin said that the city already has $7 million in the budget for this type of response, and then they'll be adding to this over the next months, and then have it fully implemented in February of 2028 if voters approve it.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of people think when they see anything on the ballot, it's just going to make their taxes go up.
Exactly.
So
True.
Thank you for saying that. Okay, so the Pickerington income tax levy. Break this down simply for us. Why is this such an important issue on the ballot?
Okay, first of all, the Pickerington School Board, the Board of Education, is asking voters to approve a 1.25% income tax increase to support the schools. This would be for operations as well as, they say, future financial stability. The district's chief financial officer says they basically don't have the ability right now to cut their way out of this problem, the financial situation, so they need more revenue. This would be, as I mentioned, 1.25% local income tax increase. It would not tax Social Security income. So they are trying to protect older folks in the neighborhood. That would not be taxed. Over the past 4 years, the district says that they've experienced deficit spending and that they're projected to reach a negative cash balance by fiscal year 2028 if they don't get this money. Now, the board also acknowledged in a news release a few months ago that this is a huge ask for the community. They realize that, but they just say that with it's basically the issues are increasing enrollment. It's a fast-growing school district. Inflation, staffing costs, and growing student needs. And about 84% of their budget goes to support personnel. So teachers, custodians, support staff, bus drivers, that sort of thing. So that's what they're asking for right now.
And definitely, like the Bowling Green professor just explained, people are feeling levy fatigue, but really passing levies and income tax increases, it's only weighed right now to support local schools.
They do partly blame
Yeah.
the state for, the changes in funding that the state legislature has been putting through as to part of the problem here. But also they list those other issues too: inflation, increasing student enrollment, teacher needs, student needs, and salaries.
Right.
Okay, Doug, thank you.
You're welcome.
What do people need to know about Election Day coverage with you?
It's going to be awesome.
Okay.
Of course.
I love it.
Of course.
No, we've got a big team
Yeah.
that's going to be, of course, all of our reporters. We're going to be covering the big races with the gubernatorial race, the Senate race, also local issues. And we have a team, as I mentioned earlier with when Dr. Caleb Hughes was with us, we've got folks, very talented people from our sister stations who are going to be here joining us from WKYC in Cleveland, WTOL in Toledo. So we're going to be reaching a large chunk of Ohio from 7 to 11 on election night right here in the podcast studio. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have reporters all out in the field as well. Up to the minute results. We've got our touch screen ready to go so we can break down where the numbers are coming in and who's leading in those primaries. And we'll be checking on the local races on the 15s as well. So 15 and 45, we'll really be looking into the numbers for the local races, such as Pickerington, such as Columbus here in our area.